Welcome back to DataBytez, your source for data-driven content. Today we are covering an aspect of life, Shu Ha Ri, a framework for mastery. In a previous video, we were talking about the power of habitual construction, the power of habits, and really, one of the highest goals for your habits is achieving mastery. Now, mastery is something that is heavily tied to intuition, developing intuition for what you do. And Shu Ha Ri is a great pathway to conceptualize what that journey looks like. So let's get started with the obvious question. What is Shu Ha Ri? So it is a concept that has its roots in Japanese martial arts. From what I was able to research for these roots, it's Aikido in particular. It roughly translates to follow the rules, break the rules, transcend the rules. And it views mastery as a journey with these three distinct phases. The phases cannot be skipped. They are organic, so it's naturally what you are going to undergo. And the importance of it, so you don't really develop frustration, because a lot of the times we grow frustrated with the process. We want things to happen right away. And Shu Ha Ri dictates that, no, it's not going to happen right away. And so the symbols look like this, the kanji. And fun fact, well, before the fun fact, this graphic comes from the Martial Devotee blog. They had this useful thing here, and I just wanted to share it because I think it's a great way to show the transition. Again, it's sequential and it's unbreakable. And so the fun fact is that Shu Ha Ri is really loved by software engineering, particularly agile practitioners. They love talking about Shu Ha Ri. It's not the first place I heard about it. Actually, the first time I've ever come across the term was, funny enough, a manga series called Kengan Omega, and he's like, oh, you've reached the final part, you've reached Ri, and he talks a little bit about Shu, and I was like, what's that? And I looked it up there. But as I read different things in regards to software engineering and agile itself, people just love talking about it. They have like the most blogs on it. Don't know why. It's just something interesting. But anyways, let's start exploring the different phases, starting with Shu, otherwise known as obey. So in this first stage, let's go here. In this first stage, it's about traditional wisdom. And what that means is you adhere to a doctrine diligently. This stage is characterized by a high degree of focus and cognizance in your action. You're very aware of what you're doing. You're very focused and aware of what you're doing. You're thinking about it nearly the whole time. At this stage, you are not allowed to impart your own identity or style into the process. You are following things to the letter. And this is important. Sometimes we grow a little bit frustrated. I think especially as we become adults. As children, we kind of follow the things because you're in a child position. Other people have authority to you. But as you become an adult, we become more set in our ways. And so, especially as we develop in some kind of profession, whenever we try to pivot or maybe we try to incorporate other aspects, we like to think that we know a certain amount. Or even if you go to a certain job and you did something similar in a previous position, they have different processes, but you kind of are more reluctant to indulge in those processes because you probably work somewhere else, right? And you were maybe top dog there. But the problem is that at this stage, whenever you're at the beginning of something, you are completely ignorant to underlying complexities. So following instruction exactly allows you to form good habits, preventing you from making mistakes in the future as you learn more advanced concepts. So whenever you see a master, someone who's been there a long time, has a lot of experience, undertakes certain actions that don't seem to make sense at first, It's most likely because they know something that you don't. It's best to copy and ask why they are doing something in the first place instead of just taking the assumption that you know more. Now, personally in my own life, I get this a lot with Excel. Because, again, DataBytez, data channel, I love. A lot of this was born because I had a lot of love in learning the technical sides of data, and then I was able to branch out into learning these different ideas, different fields. But it started with data, and it started specifically with Excel. And as I learned more Excel, I started to understand the importance of structure, consistency. Consistency is important. Why is it important? Well, there are certain tools in Excel called Power Query. And so you're able to aggregate a lot of data. And maybe you have it across different workbooks for different years or whatever. Or even if using the functions. Things work a lot better when they are structured, especially when they're in table objects. Because then you're able to pull things directly from tables. And then you're able to do joins and all this other stuff a lot more cleanly. And you also want to follow different levels of normalization, always wanting to make sure you're in the third level, because a lot of people have the bad habit of putting more than one dimension in a cell. So things that should be broken up for some reason are put in together, and there's no standard delimiter to separate them or able to clean them up efficiently, because there's, again, no enforcement of consistent patterns. And I don't want to really dive into the technicality of data in this episode about how to use Excel properly. You want to check that, look at my other content when we focus on that. But it's to highlight the fact that I would explain these things, and I would say, like, it's important to implement structure to enforce this consistency. Don't include it. Stop putting the bad habit of putting things in parentheses and then putting it within the same cell. You're overcrowding it. It's supposed to be atomic. It's at the atomic level, and then people would just be like, ugh, it's too much work. Why would you take the extra time to do it? But then when it came time to do something else where the data was needed, I would spend a lot less time working on it, and they would be like, how do you get it done so fast? And I would come back, it's like, well, it's because I structured it. I planned ahead. The reason why I kept saying we need to do it this way was because I could envision what the process was, and I was trying to explain that to you, but you were too busy saying that what I was doing was a waste of time. Of course, I could spend forever on that, but it's a thing that I come across constantly. No one wants to take the time to ask, why am I doing something? They just say it looks like a waste of time. They have already formed the assumption in their head of what I'm doing is a waste. What is just superfluous, it's just extra, and are amazed by the result. But I was like, well, if you'd not been so quick to judge, you could have had the same result if you had just asked, if you had just copied me. I had a coworker that it was really funny that it wasn't until I left my job they started saying, like, oh, you should do it the way Patrick taught me because it's better, I'm telling you. And then the same it was funny because they refused to listen to me when I was trying to teach them to do it certain ways. And now they came across the same kind of resistance where they're trying to tell someone else to do it a certain way because it's a lot faster. And they're just being very difficult because they believe they know more. And then they come back to that same person and are like, oh my God, how do you get it done? I need you to show me those ways. Like, I told you. Anyways, I don't want to spend too much time on this first part, but it's important that it's characterized, again, by following things to the letter. Do things the way you are taught exactly. Just learn what's done. And then after a while, you get to move on to the next phase, which is Ha. Or this phase is known as digression, where you digress. And so this stage is characterized with breaking with tradition. So after you've really followed the doctrine to the T, you've started making a habit, you can start keeping what works for you and discarding what doesn't. This stage is characterized by a lower degree of focus compared to Shu, with actions now becoming thoughtless. You no longer have to really think about it. So think about like driving a car. when you're first learning to drive a car or ride a bike, you're very focused on everything that you're doing. You're looking around consistently to make sure that you're safe, you're not going to hit other cars. You're like kind of a little panicky, right? But over time, as you drive more, you start thinking a little bit less. You're not like, oh my God, are my hands in the right place? Or no, you start moving your hands. You're not as diligent in there. You're not checking your mirrors as often because you kind of have a more situational awareness about what's going on. Now, at this point, you begin to form a unique identity and style that you can incorporate into your work. So it's not just the flavorless doctrine of whatever you're doing, whatever you're adhering to, whatever you're following. You can start by discarding and keeping what good's for you. Start shaping your own expression in that work, that field that you're in. So that is where that is what characterizes Ha. And again, you start becoming thoughtless now. You're not thinking so much about what you're doing. It just kind of flows. Now, if that is Ha, Ri, you might be able to kind of think, is where now you separate. This final stage of mastery is known as transcendence, and you are no longer bound by doctrine. You've kept what worked for you, you discarded the rest, and now you have something wholly unique, and it's your flavor of things. So this stage is characterized by minimal effort, minimal thought, minimal almost everything, because it just comes naturally to you. It just flows from you. It's like you were always doing this since you were like walking, right? You don't even think about walking. You just walk. You just do it. That's how, like breathing. And this is now a complete expression of the self. Your work is a reflection of your identity. It's has clearly your imprint. So back in the day, different blacksmiths would have different marks to indicate that their work, something, maybe an engraving or something like that. I believe it had its own name, but I can't recall it right now. And it's that it would say, hey, this is from me. And so now your work has its own engraving. It's the product of it. It's uniquely you. And this is the final stage. This is where we shoot for. Now, it takes a long time to get there. Do not believe it's a very short path, but the path is consistent. And that is because with Shu Ha Ri, this framework is essentially universal. Now, something important of note, Shu Ha Ri is on the skill level in terms of it is for any particular skill. You may embark on this process on multiple skills, multiple professions, but the path will always be the same. And you might not reach the same because you might have a natural penchant. It might not take you the same amount of time because we're all naturally inclined to certain aspects over others, where it might be shorter or longer for you. For instance, I like data. I like working with numbers. I like working with spreadsheets. I like working with programming. I am not particularly art inclined. To me, personally, what I find as my expression is when I'm able to structure my projects in a certain way that allows for high degree of, the word I'm looking for is, I guess, resilience. So if a part breaks, it's easy to go and change. I actually kind of enjoy that part. Good architecture. Now, I'm definitely by far is not the, I would be first to admit there's a high degree of technicality. There's always something higher. And I definitely have not reached the apex of things, but I know a good bit, I can teach you and you would think I'm doing some magic, but part of the beauty of learning is that you realize how much you don't know. And the world is full of information. I was at the library the other day in the civil engineering section, and they have, I think, 6 super thick books on just concrete, like concrete with a high degree of technicality, and something so benign you'd be like, it's the product of decades of writings and all sorts of things. And so it's very hard to achieve that kind of mastery over a field, over a work. So I would say I'm still probably in the hot, but maybe watching me you disagree. But you can apply this framework anywhere. And so in conjunction with the good habits that we talked about in the previous video, you really want to ensure that you're on a path, a trajectory for mastery. That's one of the things that you should be actively choosing your habits for, that will lead you to this Shu Ha Ri kind of, the word I'm looking for is this ascension up the ladder. This ascension of Shu Ha Ri is kind of what you're shooting for. Anyways, that's the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it kind of helped you get a grounding of yourself about the process of really getting good at something. It is something you cannot avoid, and you just be willing to not be so quick to think you know more, that you know better. Always be willing to get yourself in the beginner's mindset and following things exactly at first. And then as you're able to discard. Now, how long you stay in that first phase will depend on prior knowledge, but it's important that you always stay there. It's not forever. Remember, eventually there will come a time where you get to impart your own identity into things and are able to improve. But again, for more data-driven content, subscribe. It's Patrick from DataBytez. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Later. Bye.